Obviously, the first question I want to ask you, you come to CES. What's been the biggest surprise? What have you seen? Any interesting observations?
Well, I think I've had the opportunity to meet with a bunch of startups, and I always love meeting with startups because they kind of shake you up and push you to think differently about what you're doing. But I also have been impressed that it takes too long to understand what startups do, especially in the digital marketing space. There's too much jargon and too much lingo and too much opacity when they describe what they're doing. So I think that's been interesting that keeps continuing, even though you would think that there'd be this push for simplification.
You'd think sometimes differentiation, it can be a big driver, but sometimes differentiation just creates sameness. People get very nervous and they're very afraid of risk. You work with some of the great travel brands, being a part of the Expedia group and Expedia, many other brands. And I think you're working probably the best category. I think all of us romanticize and have fun about travel. And it's not just getting on a plane or getting on a train, or it's like the joys of travel. They may get upset, but they love talking about travel. What's a fun part of the job, and what's a more challenging part of the job?
Yeah, well, you're right. I love the travel industry, and I'm really blessed to be working in the travel industry. I really have been super lucky to visit a ton of different places. That was particularly true in my last job, where we were working with a lot of local tourism boards and local marketing partners who wanted to promote their destinations. And I think one of the surprises from that line of work was a lot of the challenges are very similar. So for tourism boards, they often have a core asset that's really attractive to a leisure traveler, like London. In the UK, everyone wants to go to London, but getting tourists to go to Devon or Wales or the Midlands is a lot bigger of a challenge. And that's a pretty consistent theme, that you think about the world's great destinations, and there's usually a lot of concentration. I think that's reflected also in the discussion about over-tourism that you might hear about, where there have been some demonstrations in places like Barcelona where just a ton of people have decided that Barcelona is the it destination. It is a beautiful city, it's wonderful, but it's also put a lot of pressure on the local population. So how can we give exposure to other parts of Spain, other parts of the region, to encourage people to understand that Barcelona may be one wonderful destination, but there are others that are worth seeing too.
You've got a wonderful house of brands that are under the umbrella. And I do think that you differentiate them relatively well. But do you think the customer, how do you think the customer sees the brands today?
Yeah.
Because they're all very different, but they still they still do a very good job.
So I think it's a great question, and it's a key marketing question and challenge for us. I think we're still in the early days of figuring that out. I think it's actually only an issue in some of our markets. So, for example, in the US and Canada, we have a lot of brands that compete with each other that are part of the Expedia family, whereas in a country like Switzerland, we really don't have the level of overlap that you see in the US and Canada. But you're involved in marketing, how hard it is to get people to listen to your message, to pay attention. So it's always a process, and it requires not just articulating it in the marketing, not just repeating it in the marketing, but also making it come to life in the product itself and then in the product experience. And that's challenging. That's challenging creatively. It's challenging operationally, and it's challenging to stay the course. I think one of the attributes of corporate America today is that the pressure and ambition of companies is so huge that there's a lot of desire to do more and more and more, and it can be easy to kind of move on to the next thing and lose sight of the importance of consistency in terms of messaging and how you execute.
What do you see as the next thing in travel marketing? Great question. What's out there?
Well, I talked a little bit on the panel about how brand marketing has, I think, over the last 5 years has been a real shift towards performance marketing. And when I say performance marketing, I mean things like search engine ads. So when you do a Google search on vacations in Mexico, the ads that you see there, or meta search ads. So like when you go to a Kayak or a Trivago and you look for hotels in Cancun, those are all examples of performance marketing. I think the industry's largely has moved significantly towards those kind of investments from a marketing perspective and away from things like brand building and brand ID. And I think you're seeing the whole industry move back towards swing in the other direction towards brand and brand ID because of your first question, which is how do you reinforce this idea of why would you use this brand over another brand? Why is this brand a good fit for you?
I always like asking this question. You know, you talk about Barcelona being the new it. I read in one of the travel magazines this morning, or travel websites actually, went looking on Booking, and that Budapest and Bucharest, Bucharest is a hot new city to visit. What's hot in travel? Where's the new fun places to go?
It's a great question. I think it depends on the brand. One of the ways that because the brands attract different audiences, I think you see different definitions of what is hot. But and we constantly are looking at that data and sharing it. That's a great marketing opportunity for us as well, because of the question you ask is asked by so many people. So for Travelocity, for example, they have looked at what are the hot beer brewing destinations. You know, where are the best breweries around the country, because things like that are tending to drive desire to travel in certain places, and they'll look at it with regularity and update the press and consumers on where they should travel if they like to drink beer.
Speaking of that, everybody talks about privacy as an issue.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes I think customers probably don't get as excited about it as we do in the business. I think one of the advantages is that when you go searching in travel, and then 2 days later I hate the word retargeting, but it comes back to see you. People are often reminded. People say that they dislike advertising, they dislike that whole process, but the one category they never get upset about is they love being reminded when they go search travel, because it's something that they really want to do.
We've actually reduced our investment in retargeting, at least on the brands that I work on, not because consumers don't like it or do like it, but because we find it's not particularly effective.
That's what I was wondering. Yeah, because you hear mixed that it doesn't really work.
Yeah, I think it can work. I think a blanket statement that it doesn't work is too strong a statement, but I think the way we were executing it was too broad brush. And I think, you know, one of the opportunities with travel and with e-commerce in general is you have the opportunity to inspire people based on what you know about them. So in my mind, the most ideal advertising is if you come to our site and you're looking at, you know, Riviera Maya as a potential vacation destination, we can use that along with signals about what kind of vacations you've booked with us in the past to suggest other places. We can suggest it on site, obviously, but it's also fun to use social platforms and other forms of online advertising to say, have you considered, you know, Belize or Costa Rica or other places that might resonate with you, and kind of inspire people to think a little more broadly. Because we do know that when people come to our sites and they think they know where they're going, they usually don't. Like if you actually look at the search journeys of how people plan vacations, the vast majority of searches for vacations, obviously family's a whole other thing, but for vacations, people start with a certain set of assumptions, and then using our site, they end up getting inspired to try other places.
One of the things that you talked about in the panel today with NIAX was the Expedia relationship with the UK Travel Tourism Board. And as a very fun and active user of Expedia, I love going to England a lot. Tell us a little bit about that, because I do believe that's a new, fascinating way to get content and commerce and do it in such a way that the customer feels like, wow, I can actually transact business here, you can market here, and I'm also learning here.
Yeah, so we have this in-house agency that allows us to build on-site solutions for for tourism boards and for other customers, for hotel chains, for airlines. And one of the fun things that we've been exploring and working with is exposing folks to destinations. So you might start with the idea that you're going to travel to London, but using content that we jointly develop, we can give you exposure to what it would be like to go to Manchester and see a Man City game, or to go to Scotland or Northern Ireland, or places that people who know they want to go to London, and London's it's the great city of the world, so why wouldn't you want to go to London, obviously, but Belfast is a really special place too, and the whole experience of driving around Northern Ireland is spectacular and not over-touristed, in my opinion. So
I agree, and I've done a lot of those Expedia 1 and 2 day train and travel quick flights up to Edinburgh, over to Wales, and learning the content. What's the fun part of your job?
I like learning. The company has, my background is I started in product marketing at Microsoft, but I don't consider myself a marketing expert. And to be able to manage the size, budget, and the complexity of this business has been really an honor for me. I don't think that I was the natural fit for taking on the role that I've most recently been in. Running a media sales and product and operations organization. Again, I had been involved in selling and developing internet advertising in the mid-90s, really early days. Banners and buttons were the name of the game. I didn't know anything about programmatic when I took over that role.
Didn't even exist.
Right. So again, the company trusted me with this business and stewarding this business. I worked in the corporate travel business. I helped build our corporate travel business, which is called Egencia. Knew nothing about the world of travel management companies when I took that job. So for me, the fun part is learning new things and then working with other people, partners, agencies that we work with to learn new things and to advance our business objectives together. And that also involves a lot of travel, which is super fun, as you know, and meeting people from different places and different cultures. So,
where's a place in the world you want to go you haven't been?
New Zealand. I've never been to New Zealand.
It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful.
I've been to Australia a bunch, but never had the opportunity to go to New Zealand.
It is one of the most beautiful places on earth. Yeah. Same with Australia.